Hey, Emma here, and shock horror, I want to talk about limited palettes. Whether you've just been wondering why on earth would anyone go to the trouble of mixing all their colours from a limited selection, or maybe you're having trouble with your artwork and your current practice and you're thinking, maybe this could work for me, I'm going to explain some pros and cons. If you don't know what a limited palette is, it's just a smaller selection of colours that you use to paint with. I'm going to be speaking specifically to watercolour, but it's applicable to other mediums as well. So whether that's 2 colours, 3, even 10, it's just about limiting your choices and working from a smaller amount of colours. So why would you even want to do this? Usually limiting things that we like is the opposite of fun. So why do people do it? There are plenty other reasons than this, but this is what sold it for me. About 8-9 years ago, I was really wanting to get a wrangle on watercolor. I'd tried it about a year or so prior, was not doing good. And I just couldn't wrap my head around all the variables. There are so many variables in watercolor, it can be a really frustrating medium to learn. You could sit down one day and paint something with the same exact supplies, same outline, same reference photo, same skill set, but on the 2 different days, you're going to get slightly different results because maybe one day the humidity was a lot higher, the temperature was higher, and so the water and the paper behaves differently. With that in mind, plus all the techniques and the infinity supplies that exist in watercolor, I personally found it really overwhelming. So I thought to myself, what if I went back to basics? And in primary school, which is elementary school here, we learned how to mix colors from the primary colors. So I stuck my head into color theory and it honestly changed everything for me. Limiting the supplies limited my overwhelm. So if you've been feeling like that too, so many brands of paper, is it hot press, cold press, what should you use? So many brush shapes and sizes and infinite colors, like you can see behind me, a massive tub of colors that have been barely touched. If you're feeling like that, you don't know what to do with what's in front of you, you've got 20 colors but not sure how to use them or where, try this, because it actually teaches you to do more with less. And it just takes away some of those decisions that you have to make in the beginning. Even if you don't stick with a limited palette forever, it can just really help you get rid of some of those variables and get a wrangle on watercolor. That's not the only thing. So one thing I really like about a limited palette is that the colors are more harmonious in your portrait. Instead of picking like 20 random colors from the tub behind me, all of which could be, some are single pigment, some are multiple pigment, some are granulating, so they're all random. If you start with just 3 primary colors that are single pigments and don't have any special qualities like staining or granulation, you are going to be able to mix so many colors from them and they're all going to come back to those 3. So there's a chart and a wheel that you can see in the background there. The chart is 144 color mixes, and that's just combining them in a particular order. There are still so many shades in between that you could achieve, and they all come back to those 3. So maybe you've got the technical side of watercolor down, but you're feeling like your paintings are just constantly clashing. Maybe you need to learn a little bit more about color and color theory. And color mixing from just a limited palette might actually help you out. It also fits well with some advice I like to give to beginners with watercolor, which is always buy the best quality supplies you can afford. And this is not about, trying to heighten the barrier into watercolor. It's that you'll actually get better results with better quality supplies and have a lot less frustrating time. A lot of people get really beginner entry-level supplies, really struggle to make anything with them, wondering why they don't look anything like what other people are painting online. And it's often because there's a ceiling on what they can do. Now, I'm not saying that you can't actually get good results from student quality supplies or even lower than student quality supplies. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying in the beginning, you have a lot to learn already. Try not to cap what you're capable of. At least see the possibilities, understand how to use the good quality supplies. And if that remains out of your budget long term, then you can step down and you're going to have a better idea on how to manage those supplies, how to get them to behave like them. Because if you sit there believing that, you're only capable of getting a saturation level of X, Y, and Z, or the paper's going to behave like that, when you've got actually no idea how the good quality supplies work, you might want to give up, and I don't want you to. So try and get the best quality supplies you can, and that's why I recommend starting with 3 primary colors for beginners, because then you drastically reduce how many paints you need to buy. When I started, I followed the advice of someone online, which I know is hypocritical because here I am giving you some, but they recommended like 20 colors. That's why I have such a big tub of Winsor & Newton paint behind me, is because I went and bought them all. Don't do that. Not yet anyway. But I didn't even know what to do with all those colors when I started painting. Like, yeah, I could follow the tutorial that you showed me, but besides that, I'm like, well, which brown, which purple, which green? And so it did just end up being a waste of money. So you can save money by buying less, but also just put that money to better use by buying higher quality supplies as well. And you're also just going to learn to do more with less. I think that's a great skill to have in any area of life, but particularly with watercolor, you are not going to feel stuck or like, oh damn, I don't have that specific shade of brown, my whole painting's ruined. You're actually going to know how to mix it from your own colors. But let's talk about some of the cons now, because there are some, and people think that this is a massive waste of time, and maybe that is so. It is time consuming. Mixing your own colors from scratch every single time is time consuming. I want to counter that by saying I find it relaxing and meditative, weird word. But anyway, I find it relaxing. I find I get time to think through what my first steps are going to be while I'm mixing. But a lot of people CBF, and I don't blame them. Especially if you're someone like me who paints a lot of wildlife and you're constantly painting something brown, you're going to mix that each and every time. I can understand why some people get sick of it, so it is time consuming. It's going to be difficult to achieve certain colors, sometimes impossible. So if you're someone who loves a color like opera pink, a very dye-based fluorescent pink color, you're just not going to get that from the primary colors unless you put opera pink in as your primary red. So there might be some colors you're just incapable of mixing from the selection of primary colors you've got. There might be more pastel colors that are hard to get. Teals and really bright turquoises can be hard to achieve. So it can be easier to just lean on some pre-made colors if you need to. There is a risk of muddying colors. Now, hey, mud is not all bad. You know, you need it if you want to paint wildlife. And the previous video I posted is all about how to get neutral colors from your limited palette. But that might just be something that you can't help but do. You are only making mud from your primaries and you're just frustrated and over it and sick of it. So you might not want to bother. You might also feel like you are using a ton of paint and wasting it and just having to replace it constantly. And yeah, you are going to feel like you are burning through your primary colors because you've got to create everything from them. If you went out and bought 20 colors, it's going to take you a long time to get through them versus these 3 that create all. I don't necessarily think, I know I'm just like rebutting all of the cons, but I don't think that's a bad thing because at least you're using them. They're going to use. Whereas what are these guys doing? Just collecting dust, you know? But you might also not be able to achieve the depth of color that you require. Something that's important to know about color mixing is every time you create a combination with those 3 colors or 2 of those 3 colors, you are going to dilute it and also take away the purity of that color a little bit. And what you may find when you create a color wheel or a color chart is those primaries and maybe even your secondaries look really bright and punchy. But as you keep going down, 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 you're introducing more water to create those mixes and they become a little less vibrant. That is a very real thing. Often some people just want to squeeze something rich and fresh out of a tube to get that nice depth that you're just not able to achieve from color mixing. Hopefully I've convinced someone out there to give color mixing and working with a limited palette a go. It changed the game for me. I still do it to this day. All the paintings you see behind me on my website, on my social media, all done from a limited palette. But even if you give it a go for a little while, you don't have to stick to it. If you start mixing the same thing over and over, you can just pick a convenience color to replace that. But you are going to learn a lot about your supplies and a lot about color mixing and theory, and hopefully feel a lot more in control of your portraits.